Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and I'm finally ready to do my full review on the CKF Evolution 2.0. This knife is a collaboration between CKF, or Custom Knife Factory, and John Sorensen of Rotten Designs. And I've been familiar with Rotten Designs for a couple of years now. I had a buddy who got one of his fixed blades a while back. It was a custom. I believe he called that model the Drifter, if I'm not mistaken. Gorgeous fixed blade, really cool. And then, yeah, I've seen just on Instagram a lot of his custom Evolution models, and then a while back the Evolution 1.0 came out with CKF, and I've known some people who've gotten those, spoken very highly of them, but it seemed a little bit large for me, and the grooves on the handle seemed like they probably wouldn't end up being my favorite. I still haven't actually held one of those, so I could be wrong. Maybe it would fit my hand like a glove and I would love it, but I never ended up jumping on one of those. And then these came out, and when these were being pre-ordered, I remember specifically having some conversations with people, just DMing on Instagram about it. People were asking if I was going to get one, right? And I didn't pre-order one. And I've been reminded now, too, that the pre-order was actually pretty simple. You didn't even have to put the whole amount down in order to pre-order it. You could put, I don't remember what the amount was, but it was much less than the full price of the knife, and then pay the remainder when they were ready to ship. And I still didn't do it. I was doing much less pre-orders at the time, to be fair. And yeah, I for one reason or another, I passed on it. And then when they started to drop, I was already like, man, I think I actually would kind of really like that. I also, at the time when they were being pre-ordered, I hadn't had any CKF knives, period, yet. And so they were somewhat of an unknown for me, even though I'd heard mostly good things. And yeah, so when they started dropping, I thought I'd missed out, and then I had a buddy who I actually knew in high school who got this one and just decided he didn't want to keep it. And so I got really lucky, and I got a homie deal, and I came into this one. And it is fantastic. This knife has very quickly kind of stolen my heart, if you will. There's a lot to say about this, and so this probably won't be the shortest, most concise video that I've ever done. But if you're looking for the hot take of whether I like this knife or not, and you don't want to go deeper in the video, yes, I love this knife. It is fantastic. It is absolutely top 5 category for me in my personal collection. Yeah, I'll be doing another top 10 video here soon, and when I do that, we'll see how everything actually ends up stacking up, but this one is up there. It's probably top 3, realistically. It's so good. So, there's that. All right, so let's kind of go through the ways by which I judge knives. We'll talk action, carry, cutting, and ergos. And then from there, I'm sure I'll also get off in the weeds a bunch of times. And maybe before I jump into that, let's have a quick heart-to-heart on CKF knives, because I've recently had a few of them, right? I personally purchased on the secondary from a buddy the Satori 2.0, which is a Rosenti design integral. Ended up letting that one go as part of a trade deal, but loved it. My review was very positive of that knife. I liked it a lot. And then I've also had the opportunity to check out Kevin, Lefty EDC, loaned me the 523 that he had just purchased, which is a Philippe Georget collaboration. And then Joe, the Knife Whisperer, loaned me the Gavco Tiger, so the CKF Gavco Tiger. So I've had a number of CKF knives. I might even be forgetting one. The one thing that I'll say about CKF knives that I've learned from my preferences is I have much better time with the ones that are not flippers. CKF does not do stiff detents across any of the models that I've experienced. Maybe there's one out there that they do a stiff detent on. I haven't found it. Their detents are really light, very soft. So like this one, it's relatively easy to shake it out. But that's fine to me because this one is a hole for deployment. And I don't typically have problems with knives shaking out. And for the hole, it's excellent. It's really good action, which we'll get to. But on the ones with flipper tabs, like the Gavco, I hated that flipper tab. Hate is a strong word. It was not acceptable to me for how expensive and how nice that knife is, and I think it kind of did a disservice to the design. The more that I've thought about it, even post-review, it just like, that knife was cool in a lot of ways, but that detent should have been way stronger, in my opinion. The Satori 2.0, the flipper was good, but you had to do it a specific way to get it just right. And really, with the fuller on that knife, I ended up middle finger flicking it a lot, which is part of why I loved it nonetheless. But I probably would have liked that knife even better if it like had a flipper delete, and instead of the fuller, it was a hole. In fact, I definitely would have liked that better. So yeah, the CKF knives, like the 523, where it's a front flipper, that works totally different mechanically than having the flipper back here. The detent felt great on that one for what it is. This one with the hole, excellent for what it is. I'd imagine the ones they do with thumb studs are probably pretty good, because I can use this external blade stop as a thumb stud and it works great. So this detent and the detents in general that I've experienced from CKF, my recommendation, take it for whatever it's worth to you personally, I am way less interested in any flipper knife that they come out with moving forward unless I start to hear that the detent has gotten stronger. I'm still very interested in any knife they come out with that has holes or studs or maybe a front flipper, because those feel appropriate to me. So take that all for what it's worth. That's a little CKF ramble fest. All right, so let's go and go ahead and just jump into kind of the categories on this knife. We'll start with Ergos. I like to start there. This knife is a little bit interesting ergonomically in the sense that you've got this big, kind of oversized finger groove here. Frankly, it's too big for my pointer finger, but it's okay. I'd rather have a little too much room than not quite enough room. Then I land my next two fingers kind of on this next curve here, and then my pinky kind of lands on the back here. Back here, this knife is nothing special to me ergonomically, if I'm being totally honest. It's really not excellent back here, but as you can see, your hand, I think, is meant to come up here. This forward choil is fantastic, and with that, it really kind of like pulls into my hand and gives me this great sense of control over the blade, and I love it. I like this knife a lot ergonomically in this grip. This is how I hold it 98% of the time. So yeah, in that forward choil, you get a saber grip, which is pretty comfortable. We'll talk jimping in a second. That's the only thing that's uncomfortable about this to me. Hammer grip, very comfortable as well. Reverse grip, very comfortable. Even down here it's good. On this grip and reverse grip, it actually, to me, makes more sense to be choked back like this. That just feels a little better. Reverse grip draw cut, not so good, but who's doing that with this knife anyways? Forward grip draw cut, actually okay. That's not bad. So yeah, the ergos of the knife, if I'm choked up, feel really good other than the jimping. This jimping, if you know me and my preferences, I typically prefer no jimping at all. I'd rather have none than any in most cases, and this is one where I would definitely prefer to not have any jimping. Or if they were going to, like, if you have to have the jimping on there, I want it to be much more tightly spaced, much less aggressive. This jimping is just, it sucks to put your thumb on for me. Like, I don't have baby thumbs. I'm playing with knives and using knives all day long. I feel like my hands are not that sensitive, not overly sensitive at least, and this jimping is just, it's a bother. The ergos don't need it either. Like, I don't feel like I need serrations for my finger up here in order to be locked into this knife. The handle and the grip area does that plenty. I'm locked in. This is too much. So that's one kind of gripe with it design-wise, but it's not at all unique to this knife. So to be fair, it's very much a my preference thing, and many, many, many knives fall victim to not being in my preference in that arena specifically. So yeah, ergos, I would say, are very good other than the jimping. Let's talk action next, because it is another shining feature of this knife. As I mentioned, it middle finger flicks like a dream. It's just perfect for middle finger flicking. The weight of the detent for that deployment method, the positioning of the hole, everything about it is so good for middle finger flicking. You can also use the hole to thumb deploy. That works just fine. And you can use the studs or external blade stops that function as studs to thumb deploy as well. Those are your options, unless you count doing that because the detent isn't that stiff. But to me, that's a worthy trade-off. If the detent isn't that stiff on this one that has holes for deployment, or a hole for deployment, holes are greater than studs. Just being consistent here. If you have a hole for deployment, the light detent can almost work in its favor. And I think it does here. I think this has a consistent kind of push-off feel when you middle finger flick it. You're not fighting against a detent. It's just a fluid, nice, easy push, and the bearings take care of the rest of the work. Some knives with a stiff detent to middle finger flick kind of suck. It can be a little bit painful to do it over and over for those of you who fidget like I do. This one is not that way. So I'm okay with the detent being a little soft there. In terms of closing this knife, it's a guillotine. It'll just drop all the way. It's a nice heavy blade on very smooth bearings. Once you kind of get past the ramp, give it a little nudge, it goes all the way home. The detent also does kind of, let me see from here, it slurps it in pretty well. So I like the way that it's set up for the design of this knife. I think it's tuned well. All right, let's talk carry. So carry on this guy, I've actually been impressed with because it's just not what I would typically pick. Like if you took the clip off of this knife and you asked me to design a clip for it, it would look radically different from this. Because I don't typically love milled titanium clips. I prefer loop over style deep carry clips that kind of conceal the knife in my pocket. That said, this one has worked really, really well. I was worried at first it was going to maybe be a little bit tight. It's not at all. I was worried also maybe getting in under this because it sits pretty flush was going to be a little bit difficult. Not at all. This goes in and out of pocket super easily. It has worked in any pair of pants that I own very comfortably. The profile is wide, but it doesn't feel crazy in pocket. There's no flipper tab that's poking you anywhere. There's it's contoured a little bit all over. Everything is smooth. It's much lighter than I expected it to be. This full titanium model is so extensively internally milled that it just feels, kind of reminds me of the Arius in the sense that when I pick it up, before I grab it, I'm expecting it to be heavier than it is when it's actually in my hand and I'm holding it. It just feels a little bit impossibly light for looking at it and seeing that it's all metal. And then you grab it and it's like, it's not a featherweight knife, but it feels light. So in pocket, it's very pleasant. I do wish that it didn't have that much knife sticking out of pocket, but it's not the end of the world. Like, I always say that's my preference, and I worry that people may think that I hate all non-deep carry pocket clips. I can still call this a good pocket clip. I'd prefer for it to be deep carry, but that doesn't at all detract from the fact that this one's done really well. And even for me, I've carried this knife so many times. I've been putting off this review so I could keep carrying it, because once I finish the review, I have less of a justifiable reason to keep carrying it, because I'll be carrying what I'm working on reviewing next. And it just is pleasant in pocket, and I like to carry this knife. So carry, I'm just going to say, is very, very good on this knife. So that leaves us with cutting. Cutting performance on here is excellent as well. One of the things that I think is immediately apparent when you look at this knife is how ridiculously awesome this hollow grind is. It's a little bit smudgy right now because I've been carrying and using this knife. But this hollow grind is just done really well. It gets down quite thin behind the edge, and it stays thin for a little bit before it starts to gain some mass to come up to a really thick stock. And it just feels like this really interesting blend between overbuilt, thick stock, kind of meaty presence as a knife, and then actually having a really almost dainty, fine cutting edge. And it's got a very usable tip with this kind of, I guess you'd call that a Wharncliffe, maybe. It's an interesting blade shape too when you just kind of take it all in. It's like a Warney with this swedge, and then you've got all belly, but it's gradual, consistent belly all the way across. Like you kind of want to like put it on a cutting board and like rock through some stuff. I don't know. It's an interesting blade shape, but I found it to be super functional. And when I'm using it, it's just easy to kind of orient like really far up a lot of the time for detail work, to choke back and like make those piercing type cuts that you need to make. It seems balanced for actual use, and for how like kind of aggressive this knife seems, I've just found that it's very pleasant and usable, and actually very handy to have as the EDC in your pocket. Yeah. So in terms of what I've cut with this, I like to usually bring that up as well. Opened a lot of packages, processed a lot of cardboard for the dumpster. I have cut a little bit of paracord with it. I've cut 1 or 2 apples with it. It's done fine for that. It gets a little thick, so it can seem a little bit like it's splitting the apple once you get kind of deep in it. Once you get up here where the blade really thickens up to that flat. But it's fine. It works pretty well for it. And yeah, a lot of packaging, all that kind of typical EDC stuff. This being a all titanium frame lock in this pretty configuration, really to me isn't like an outdoorsy knife that you're going to find in my pocket on a hike, hacking at overgrown trails or anything like that. Not to say that it wouldn't necessarily stand up to it, but it's just not the category I even see this knife in. The blade is M390, by the way. I don't think I mentioned that. You can see it marked right in there, and it also is numbered. So this one is number 76. It's a gas station knife. Yeah, so, I mean, cutting is really good. Carry is really good. Ergos are really good. Action is really good. It's like every category, this knife is just excellent. And beyond that, like, there are some knives that I get where it's like, they do all those things. They're good at carry, good at cutting, good at action, good at ergos, but they don't have like this spark or this sizzle to them that gets me very excited. And that happens every now and then. I try to be upfront about that, even though it may not make much sense, and maybe I seem like I'm detached in some way when that happens, where it's like, this knife is great, but I don't love it. You know, like, how jaded am I, maybe? But this one, I do feel that spark and that excitement about it. I want to put this knife in my pocket. I want to show it to people. I want to use it. It makes me happy to have this knife on me and to have it be the knife that, I don't know, the knife that's in my pocket. It works for me, and it feels special and different, and it feels nice. This knife feels like a flex when you're showing it to other people, and it's like, it's got a look to it and a feel to it, and whether that's tangible or intangible, it happens, and it's true on this one for me. Another thing that I talk about every now and then lately is the sounds a knife makes, and this knife makes fantastic sounds. Absolutely just incredible. Let me put it by the mic for a second and kind of ASMR you. It's excellent. And it like seems a little bit mechanical, but it's still so smooth, and it's enjoyable to fidget with. It's enjoyable to carry. It's enjoyable to use. Like, there's not much else to say about it other than it's really, really good at all of those things. So I guess we're going to kind of leave it at that. This is one of my favorite knives I've reviewed in a long time. It is absolutely a knife that belongs in the top ranks of my collection. One thing that I'm going to do here soon, now that I've finished this full review, and a number of people have said that they'd like to see this as well, which I think is cool. I'm going to do a comparison between this and the Koenig Arius. The Koenig Arius, I've been saying for a long time, is my favorite knife in my collection. If you ask me if this dethrones the Arius, I'd say no. But if you ask me, like, which one would you want to sell today? I'd be like, whew, that's really hard. I don't plan on selling either of them, but it would be a tough call. And I think that's a good indicator that this knife is in that range with the Arius. And so I look forward to kind of scoring that and seeing where they actually land from category to category. Because there's no way that this won't take some of the categories. Like, it is an excellent knife, and it is in that league, in my opinion, which is impressive to me. So I will be doing that comparison soon, and I look forward to seeing what the outcome is. I don't know yet, but yeah, this is the CKF Evo 2.0. It's the rotten design, and goodness, it is awesome. So if you get a chance to snag one of these for a price that isn't insane on the secondary, I saw one of these posted earlier today for a little over $800. This one was, I think, just under $600 new. If you get, like, your tolerance for what you want to spend, obviously I can't really say much about, but if you find one that you think is a reasonable deal, I absolutely recommend this knife. Like, it's a home run, in my opinion. So I can't imagine someone getting this knife and being disappointed by it, unless they get a lemon or something, which I don't know how frequent that is from CKF. But if you get one and it's like this, you're probably going to love it, unless you have totally different preferences than me, which is fine too. Anyway, I love this knife. It's great. I'm going to stop rambling about it. We're going to call it good. So thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you on the next one.